Hello, everybody. This is Joe Firestone for Empowering Democracy. This is my third update of the day. And the topic of this stream is Democratic leadership possibilities in the House. So, I'm going to begin. Well, first, what I want to say is there hasn't been a great deal of attention paid to what's been going on behind the scene with respect to the leadership possibilities in the House. But with the announcement by Nancy Pelosi that she will not be standing for the leader of the Democratic Party in the House, but will continue to stay in the House and will continue, I believe, as the Speaker of the House, until this session, is ended. That, of course, struck like a ton of bricks. And then it became clear that Steny Hoyer was not going to seek a leadership spot. He was the number two. And it's also clear that Jim Clyburn, it's not entirely clear what Jim Clyburn is going to do. He said he wanted to remain, in leadership, but he was the whip. And he's not going to run for whip again. So this has cleared a situation for other people. There are no elections that have taken place as yet. The elections will be after Thanksgiving, we are told. So what we have to look out for is the maneuvering. And for that, I think we have to look. Hi, Steve. How are you? Thanks for coming. I think what we have to look at is some background, what people have been doing for some time. Well, The Hill has a piece, which I'm going to share with you right now. Hey, Kay, how are you? Give me a moment to share the screen. So this was a piece that appeared on September 28th, 2022, some time ago. And there's Joyce Beatty smiling. She's a member of the Congressional Black Caucus and has been in Congress for some time. The title of the article is Hill Dems' Hottest Leadership Ticket. It's a Politico article. House number 6. House number 6 is a vice chair position. The vice chair race in the lower chamber is attracting major heat. And there's Joyce Beatty, has pointedly sought to bridge ideological divides within the Congressional Black Caucus, which includes, God bless you, honey, some of the party's most senior members and its most progressive. While most of Washington focused on the future of House Democrats' upper leadership rungs, Their competitive race so far actually sits at number 6. As Speaker Pelosi and her top 2 lieutenants stay mum about their future plans, that is, Steny Hoyer was staying mum and Jim Clyburn was staying mum. The battle to serve as vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus next year is bursting into public view. 4 contenders are actively jostling for what's widely seen as a stepping stone to a more senior position in their party. It's like becoming the third vice president of the Rotary Club, said Representative Dan Kildee, Democrat of Michigan, of the interest in the lower ranking position. Quote, "You know you're going to be president one day," unquote. The 4 vice chair hopefuls so far are Representatives Joyce Beatty, Democrat of Ohio, also Madeline Dean, Democrat of Pennsylvania, Debbie Dingell, Democrat of Michigan, and Ted Lieu, Democrat of California. Between them, nearly every corner of the caucus is represented: the Congressional Black Caucus, the Progressives, the New Democrat Coalition, that is Madeline Dean, and the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, that is Ted Lieu, of course. So the progressive person who is represented in there is Debbie Dingell of Michigan. Most of the quartet have laid the groundwork for months, if not years, to snag a public-facing position that assists in messaging and managing the whims of a hugely diverse caucus. And all of them stepped up their outreach to fellow Democrats in recent weeks, according to interviews with more than a dozen Democratic lawmakers and aides. With months to go until a leadership election that likely won't take place until after Thanksgiving, most of those Democrats said it's nearly impossible to name a front runner. The focus on the number 6 position isn't entirely unexpected, as the vice chairmanship is one of the few positions with a known vacancy. The post's current occupant, specifically Rep. Pete Aguilar, Democrat of California, is planning to run for a higher position within leadership if and when there are vacancies next year. Its previous occupant, specifically Massachusetts Representative Catherine Clark, is also expected to run for a higher perch. The top 3 is very messy. It's just that it's not formalized because no one actually knows, said Ted Lieu, when asked about the state of leadership races, both higher ranking and more under the radar. There's Ted Lieu. Lieu's pitch to colleagues has centered around his work on the caucus messaging arm, known as the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, and his involvement with the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, where he is the whip. A prolific fundraiser, he served in a high-profile role as a manager for Donald Trump's second impeachment trial and is a vocal critic of the former president on social media. I'm getting very strong support from the ethnic caucuses from California. That's half the caucus already, Lieu said in an interview. The Air Force veteran is vying against Debbie Dingell, another co-chair of House Democrats' messaging arm, who also won that caucus-wide position after the midterms in 2018. Dingell, first elected to fill the seat of her late husband, the late House Dean Representative John Dingell, is a critical ally of the current leadership and is particularly active on trade, the auto industry, and prescription drugs. She's also used her position to try to steer her party, whether it was assessing Trump's chances in 2016 or this year's debacle over the president's COVID funding request. There's Debbie Dingell raising her glasses and her arms to the sky. Quote, "I'm one of the few people who's not afraid to speak up," unquote, Dingell said, describing her pitch for the vice chairmanship. If elected, she said, one of her priorities would be working to engage more members who now sit, quote, in the middle of the caucus. Quote, "We need to find a way to get everybody in the caucus a feel for being relevant," she said. Now, Dean, meanwhile, is the most junior member in the race. She too rose to prominence after Pelosi tapped her as an impeachment manager and helped argue the House's second post-January 6th case against Trump. And that was a role with emotional weight, since she was part of the so-called gallery group barricaded in the chamber when the rioters breached the Capitol. The former Pennsylvania state legislator argued that far more has happened in her 4 years in office than the typical second term member. These two Congresses have been so jam-packed, dynamic, incredibly important that I didn't think there would be any reason why I would have to wait in some sort of line, unquote. Representing a suburban Philadelphia district, Dean stressed the importance of her swing state in the potential vice chairmanship, but what qualifies her the most, she said, is being the youngest of 7 children. She said, quote, "I know how to navigate a complicated family," which is what the caucus is. And there she is. The most recent entrant is Joyce Beatty, who led the Congressional Black Caucus for nearly 2 years. The Ohioan who fended off a Justice Democrats-backed primary challenger in 2020 has pointedly sought to bridge ideological divides within the Black Caucus, which includes some of the party's most senior members and its most progressive members. That included high-stakes negotiations on legislation, such as last week's pro-policing bills, as well as Biden's massive infrastructure law last summer. On both occasions, Beatty's involvement helped end weeks of infighting within the caucus. Quote, "I have a great track record of being supportive to those I work with, but also being a representative of the greater population," unquote, Beatty said, adding that she had not yet begun formally whipping votes for her leadership bid. The field for vice chair isn't necessarily set. Several Democrats predicted that other candidates would jump in after the November 8th election, or that one of more of the candidates could decide to bow out and seek a position after the dust settled from other high-ranking races. The current chair of the House Democratic Caucus, Hakeem Jeffries, is term limited in his position and is expected to join the leadership shuffle if there are vacancies above, creating another opening for his job. So far, only one Democrat has publicly indicated he's eyeing that position, specifically Representative Joe Neguse, who's a Democrat of Colorado, and also the most progressive person we've mentioned so far as candidates for the leadership, with the possible exception of Debbie Dingell. Besides Jeffries, Clark, and Aguilar, this is Catherine Clark, remember, two other Democrats have been making calls about potential openings in the top three leadership spots. Representatives Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, and Pramila Jayapal, the Democrat of Washington. The continued uncertainty at the top of the Democrats' leadership chain, though, has kept most of that jockeying quiet. While Pelosi had committed to departing her position after this term, she has said nothing lately on the subject, deflecting that she is focused on the midterms, and her top two deputies, Majority Leader Steny Hoyer and Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, have not ruled out another run for leadership. Several other Democrats are looking at lower-level caucus-wide races, but have not yet decided on which ones. These include Representatives David Cicilline of Rhode Island, also Lauren Underwood of Illinois, Colin Allred, Democrat of Texas, Dean Phillips, who's a Democrat of Minnesota, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a Democrat of Florida. God forbid. Even the four lawmakers currently seeking the vice chair have been careful not to let their campaigns get in the way of what they call the more important one, keeping the House GOP from seizing the majority. Well, I guess they failed at that, everybody, didn't they? Quote, I think everyone should stay singularly focused on making sure we protect the majority, quote unquote, said David Cicilline, who formerly served in House leadership. Quote, we're going to have lots of time to jockey for positions, unquote. So that's background. That particular article is just background. Now let's take a look at some of the things that just came out today after Nancy Pelosi made her announcement. So, here is an article from The Hill. Entitled, Jeffries Announces Bid for House Democratic Leader. This was as of 10:43 a.m. this morning, November 18th, 2022. Rep. Hakeem Jeffries in New York on Friday formally announced his bid to replace Speaker Nancy Pelosi at the top of the Democratic Party in the House next year, one day after the longtime leader said she would step out of that position in the next Congress. Jeffries, the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, has long been eyeing a run to replace Pelosi as the leader of House Democrats when she stepped down. If he succeeds as expected, he would become the first black leader of either party in either chamber in the history of Congress. To launch his bid, Jeffrey sent a 4-page letter to colleagues Friday morning outlining his goals for the caucus as it heads into the next Congress as the minority party. When I initially sought the position of chair of the House Democratic Caucus 2 terms ago, none of us could have predicted the challenges the American people would confront in the years to come. However, time and time again, throughout a period of enormous turmoil for our nation, House Democrats rose to the occasion, Jeffries wrote. Quote, today I write to humbly ask you for your support for the position of House Democratic leader as we once again prepare to meet the moment, unquote, he added. Jeffries is one of three up and coming Democratic leaders who've been eyeing a chance to move up the leadership ranks whenever the opportunity emerged, with Pelosi stepping down on Thursday and her two deputies, specifically Majority Leader Steny Hoyer of Maryland, Democratic Whip James Clyburn of South Carolina, following close behind. The path was clear for them to do so. Catherine Clark, Democrat of Massachusetts, currently the fourth-ranking House Democrat. She was the assistant speaker. I wasn't aware that was the fourth-ranking House Democrat. I thought the fourth-ranking one was actually the caucus chair. But anyway, she launched her bid on Friday to move up to the number 2 whip spot in the next Congress. So the number 1 spot is the leadership spot, and the candidate running for that, the first one, and right now the only one, is Hakeem Jeffries. So Catherine Clark is moving up. She was the assistant speaker, and she is moving up to the number 2 whip spot, or trying to anyway, in the next Congress. Okay, and Aguilar, the 6th ranking vice chair of the caucus, is vying to replace Hakeem Jeffries as caucus chairman. In his own letter to Democrats on Friday, Aguilar emphasized that he is the only member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus in the highest ranks of the party, and he wants the group to be represented in the next Congress as well. So anyway, Aguilar's decision to jump into the caucus chairman race was a late surprise, and pits him against Joe Neguse, Democrat of Colorado, who, like Jeffries and Clyburn, is a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. The unexpected challenge for the number 3 spot came after Clyburn delivered a surprise of his own. Unlike Pelosi and Hoyer, who stepped down from leadership altogether, he's vying to remain as the assistant leader, eventually the assistant speaker, the spot that had been occupied by Catherine Clark. This is also the same spot that we initially thought that Aguilar was seeking. Clyburn's endorsement of Joe Biden in South Carolina during the 2020 Democratic presidential primary was crucial to Biden securing the nomination, and in a letter to Democrats, he reminded his colleagues of that episode while touting his long experience in the leadership ranks. Jeffries gave a hat tip to the outgoing Big Three in his letter, announcing his bid for Democratic leader, underscoring the invaluable opportunity he had to learn from Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn. He said, quote, I am thankful for the invaluable opportunity I've had to learn from legendary figures like our iconic Speaker Nancy Pelosi, our resolute leader Steny Hoyer, and our historic Majority Whip James E. Clyburn, who has mentored and nurtured my leadership development the moment I arrived in Congress, Jeffries wrote. The New York Democrat said his candidacy for the top House Democrat is based on three operating principles: empowering every member, prioritizing lawmaker security, and reclaiming the majority. As part of the second prong, he proposed creating a task force on member safety to document challenges and experiences members and their families have faced, as well as a set of steps to address the issue. He said such a group is necessary after the violent assault on Paul Pelosi, the husband of Nancy Pelosi, at their San Francisco home last month, and the shootings of Republican Whip Steve Scalise. Uh,
Joey, are you done?
no, I guess I am not. Sorry, folks, I lost the thread here. It's because Hakeem Jeffries is so exciting. As part of the second prong, he proposed creating a task force on member safety to document challenges and experiences members and their families have faced, as well as a set of steps to address the issue. He said such a group is necessary after the violent assault on Paul Pelosi, the husband of Nancy Pelosi, at their San Francisco home last month, and the shootings of House Republican Whip Steve Scalise from Louisiana and former Representative Gabby Giffords, a Democrat, of Arizona. For God's sakes, it's been a decade since Gabby Giffords was shot. That's amazing. So that was Jeffrey's announcement. So he's running, not for speaker yet, of course, but for leader. If he becomes leader, then if all goes well with the Democrats, it's almost certain that he's going to become speaker. So if one's interested in blocking Hakeem Jeffries, who's a corporate Democrat, and who, even though he's a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, is anything but a progressive. He's worked against the progressives, at least for the last 4 years, or more. He's been basically Nancy Pelosi's errand boy. From the progressive point of view, he is not the person they would like to see to give them further advancements. He is, in fact, far from the right person. I don't know why they would support him for the speakership. Now, here's Catherine Clark. Catherine Clark is not as widely known as Hakeem Jeffries. She doesn't have a particular image. I kind of view her as a corporate Democrat as well, but she doesn't come over with a high profile as a corporate Democrat the way Hakeem Jeffries did. Anyway, Representative Catherine Clark, a Democrat of Massachusetts, on Friday launched her bid to become the second-ranking Democrat in the next Congress, a spot that was cleared a day earlier when Representative Steny Hoyer said he would leave the leadership ranks next year. Clark, a 10-year veteran of the House, currently serves as the Assistant Speaker, the fourth ranking position within the Democrats' hierarchy. In her announcement to seek a nomination to the whip position was no surprise. Reading between the lines, she and Jeffries kind of agreed that she would move to the number 2 position and that she would support him for the number 1 position. It's pretty plain that's what is going on here. Of the two, she seems to be the more progressive, though she's not known to be a particularly strong progressive. Clark is part of a trio of Democratic leaders. Hakeem Jeffries, and Peter Aguilar, California, are the other two. That's been widely expected to seek the top 3 spots in the caucus whenever the chance arose. That chance came on Thursday when both Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Hoyer, the House Majority Leader, announced they would cede their leadership positions next year, even as they would remain in Congress in a more everyday role. Jim Clyburn, who has served as the third-ranking Democrat since 2006, also endorsed the ascension of Jeffries, Clark, and Aguilar. But unlike Pelosi and Hoyer, he said he wants to remain a part of the party brass as the assistant leader, which was the position just occupied by Catherine Clark, according to multiple sources. A spot that would fall to number 4 on the leadership totem next year, below the caucus chair. Okay, so whoever would get to be the caucus chair would be higher on the totem pole than Jim Clyburn, at least in the way these people are maneuvering and expecting things to happen. Jeffries would have the number 1 role. Catherine Clark would have the number 2 role. James Clyburn wants the number 4 role, which is below the caucus chair. So the number 3 role might go to Aguilar. According to James Clyburn, he sees himself as moving to the number 4 position, and he endorsed the ascension of Jeffries, Clark, and Aguilar to the number 3 position, which is chair of the party caucus, basically the policy leader of the party in the House. So from my point of view, I don't see Aguilar as particularly progressive. He may be somewhere in the middle of the caucus, but I think he's more over to the right wing. I personally don't endorse him. I don't even think he's as lefty as Catherine Clark is. If he became the caucus chair, usually the caucus chair is the heir apparent to the leader, then I think that would be a bad outcome for the progressives. So, that could force a battle between Aguilar and Representative Joe Neguse, an up-and-coming Colorado Democrat, for the caucus chairmanship, a spot for which Neguse has already announced his candidacy. Clark, meanwhile, has no competition for the whip spot so far. In a letter to fellow Democrats, she vowed to be a line of defense against the Republicans who will control the House next year with a majority that will be slim and to empower rank and file lawmakers, quote, in the decision making process. I personally would like to know more about how she expects to do that. She said, I will fight for our agenda and your priorities while running a strategic defense, unquote, whatever that means. You can trust me to listen to all corners of the caucus, be results oriented, and be resolute in my commitment to our values. How about policies? Jeffries and Aguilar are expected to launch their own leadership bids as early as Friday, and we have already seen that Jeffries has done so. Here's another piece that just appeared this morning. This one was about Steny Hoyer. Hoyer won't seek House leadership. Clyburn eyeing run for number 4. That was that was yesterday as of 1:12 p.m. ET. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer announced Thursday he'll remain in Congress next year, but won't seek a leadership position, joining Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who had announced the same decision moments before. The surprise development clears the way for Representative Hakeem Jeffries, the current chairman of the caucus, of the House Democratic Caucus, to jump several rungs up the leadership ladder to replace Nancy Pelosi in next Congress, when Republicans will take control of the lower chamber. This jump of several rungs up is not unexpected. In other words, it's kind of the normal thing. Before the election of 2018, when AOC was running for Congress in the New York 14th District, she was running against Joe Crowley, who was widely thought to be the coming successor to Nancy Pelosi. He was thought to be her fair-haired boy. So in other words, when she left, she was going to designate him as the speaker-select if Democrats still held the House. So he was going to jump several rungs up the leadership ladder to replace her. Of course, that became out of the question when he lost to AOC and left the Congress. At that point, Hakeem Jeffries became the chair of the House Democratic Caucus. And so my point is, the expected move here is that it's the number 4 person, the House, the chair of the House Caucus, who is generally the designated successor to the Speaker. So this is not unusual. It's been known since Pelosi took over in 2019 again that her choice for her successor was going to be Hakeem Jeffries. My view is that the Democratic Party needs a new start. It needs to move away from the corporate party that it is today to somewhere closer to the people. That Hakeem Jeffries is not the person to do that. He is the person to continue along the same path that Nancy Pelosi had the party on, which was not a good path for the base of the party. In a letter to fellow Democrats, Hoyer said he's proud of his work in leadership, but, quote, now is the time for a new generation of leaders. He quickly endorsed Jeffries who faces no other challenger. Not yet. There's nobody has had the guts yet to challenge Nancy Pelosi's pick as her successor. It was pretty bold, okay, of Joe Neguse to want to move into the position that he wants to move into. But he has not announced for party leader. He has announced for caucus chair. So, in announcing for caucus chair, he is not contesting Hakeem Jeffries' claim to be the leader of the party in Congress, okay, the minority leader. In addition, the long tenure of Pelosi, Hoyer, and Representative Jim Clyburn, okay, the Democratic whip, had frustrated the ambitions of younger lawmakers eager to join the leadership ranks. With Pelosi stepping down, the other two instantly became more vulnerable to internal challenges. So Clyburn, by stepping out of the way and saying he wanted number 4, was basically aware of that and is basically saying he does want to remain in leadership. He's just not going to fight with somebody else for the number 2 position or for the number 1 position. So Hoyer said, I look forward to serving as a resource to him, to the rest of our Democratic leadership team, and to our entire caucus in whatever capacity I can best be of assistance as we move forward together to address the nation's challenges. So he moved out of the way of Hakeem Jeffries. He said, Hoyer did, that he intends to return to the powerful Appropriations Committee, a post he had held before joining leadership, to work on issues including education, healthcare, and efforts to boost domestic manufacturing. That would not be good for the Democratic Party also and for the progressive wing, because he's an opponent of Medicare for all. So letting him do that is not something that the party ought to do, in my view. He said, I also look forward to continuing my focus on voting rights, civil rights, and human rights, which I have made priorities throughout my public life. Hoyer has been the number 2 House Democrat, just behind Pelosi, since 2003. He was long thought to be the heir apparent to the top spot whenever Pelosi decided to bow out. As the years stretched on under Pelosi's reign, however, the composition of the caucus shifted from one featuring a considerable number of moderates to a more liberal heavy group, a shift thought to have disadvantaged the centrist Steny Hoyer. In addition, the long tenure of Pelosi, Hoyer, and Representative Jim Clyburn, the Democratic whip, had frustrated the ambitions of younger lawmakers eager to join the leadership ranks. With Pelosi stepping down, the other two instantly became more vulnerable to internal challenges. Joyce Beatty, Democrat of Ohio, who heads the Congressional Black Caucus, said Thursday that the group was likely to vote unanimously for Jeffries, who is a member, over any potential challenger, including Hoyer. Instead, Hoyer will step down and join the rank and file in the next Congress. Quote, I look forward to working with all of you in the coming days and months to pursue the policies that will build a stronger, fair, and more just America for the people, he wrote. I don't know when the last time was that he did anything for the people. Clyburn, the third ranking Democrat in the House, for his part, I don't know when the last time was when he did anything for the people either. He certainly didn't do anything for the people when uh, he went solidly in back of Joe Biden for the nomination in 2020 rather than Bernie Sanders. He said he looked forward to assisting our new generation of Democratic leaders, naming Jeffries, Catherine Clark, and Aguilar, who are expected to seek the top 3 spots respectively. Multiple sources told The Hill that Clyburn also wants to remain in the top tiers of leadership and that he would run for the assistant leader role, which, as I said before, is the role that Catherine Clark wants to vacate in order to become the whip. That was the number 3 spot the last time Democrats were in the minority, but would fall to the number 4 slot in the next Congress behind caucus chair, according to the sources. So that's the last of the Hill articles I wanted to show you on that and to comment on. The last of the articles, however, altogether, is another Politico piece. And that one is from today. Let me share the screen once more. And the headline is Dems get an array. Dems get in array on future leadership after Pelosi departs. Lawmakers have managed to stealthily diffuse rivalries for nearly every position at the top of the House caucus, despite their 3 major leadership retirements. There's a picture of Jayapal. She announced she was running for re-election as chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I hope the progressives in the CPC get rid of her because she doesn't look like a progressive to me. House Democrats are increasingly likely to elect their Okay, this article is from today. It's by Nicholas Wu. They're increasingly likely to elect their troika of top leaders for the next Congress without any major confrontation, ensuring a show of unity as they enter the minority. I hope the progressives don't allow that, because a show of unity is not what we need now. We need to get among the top leaders people who really care about the people. These 3, from my point of view, do not. They care about the corporations. They care about the donors. They will not bring change. going on. And it didn't happen without some work. That is the unity. The caucus has quietly diffused several potential conflicts that could have divided its members. Jayapal, who'd been eyeing a shot for the number 2 slot, that's the whip slot, announced Friday she was running for re-election as chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus instead of mounting a caucus-wide bid for the leadership. Now, why did she do that? What scared her off? Catherine Clark has been pretty much a nonentity working in the background. Jayapal has been much more visible as the head of the caucus. Why isn't she at least contesting Catherine Clark's run for the whip slot? Why isn't she at least contesting that? Or why did she not contest for the number 3 slot, since that often is the heir apparent to the speaker? I don't know, but that's her plan. She's not going for top leadership. She's going for the CPC leader again. That follows Adam Schiff's decision to drop his bid for the number 1 spot as he eyes a run for Senate seat in California, clearing the way for current caucus chair Rep. Hakeem Jeffries to run for minority leader unopposed. Well, that's nice for Jeffries, but Adam Schiff may have a competitor. Since Katie Porter just won her congressional seat back, and since that seat is an increasingly difficult one for her to win because it's not in a Democratic friendly district, in every race, no matter how well she does in the Congress, she has a tough slog. She has a tough fight to win again. On the other hand, Dianne Feinstein this will certainly be her last term in Congress. I don't think she has to stand again until 2026. But of course, it would be convenient for Katie Porter to run for the Senate seat in 2026, or whenever Feinstein decides to step down and there's a special election in California. So Schiff, who's not a widely popular representative, may have competition, and pretty good competition, from Katie Porter. So he may regret that he's not going to run against Hakeem Jeffries. Not that I would want him to anyway, because he's a guy I dislike even more than Hakeem Jeffries. Now, top Democrats are working behind the scenes to head off a showdown between Joe Neguse and Peter Aguilar over Jeffries' soon-to-be vacant post, which both of them are seeking. Discussions are ongoing about but Joe Neguse staying at House Democrats' messaging arm instead, and perhaps running for a new position as its chair, according to 3 people familiar with the situation. So notice what they're saying now. they'll create a special new position for the goose as chair. Leave Debbie Dingle where she is as part of the messaging arm. And so giving Joe and the Goose a pretty good position for further ascension if he gets out of Aguilar's way. So what are they giving to Debbie Dingle? I don't know what they're giving to Debbie Dingle, but if I were Debbie Dingle, I'd be running against Hakeem Jeffries, because Debbie Dingle is far closer to the center of the caucus than Hakeem Jeffries is. Hakeem Jeffries is on the right of the caucus, corporate Democrat that he is. These people are trying to shunt aside by Debbie Dingle. They're expecting her to sit still and take it. I don't know if that's going to happen. But Debbie Dingle is pretty feisty. And it seems to me, if there's anyone who might put in a challenge to Jeffries at this point, it is she. If she were to do that, that would really backfire on the establishment, because they're evidently trying to shunt her aside and put the candidate from California, Aguilar, in to a role, in leadership, shunting Joe Neguse aside as well, but paying him off while offering nothing to Debbie Dingle. So what does Debbie Dingle have to lose? She might as well run against Hakeem Jeffries. She has a number of advantages over Hakeem Jeffries. One is that she's a woman, and the Democratic Party has gotten used to women leaders and women speakers. Number two, she has some support from the Problem Solvers Caucus, who know they can deal with her. And number three, she's strong on the progressive side, as well. And she knows every Democrat in the world, which is another advantage for her. So let's see if these manipulators can stop an attempt, of Debbie Dingle to run for Pelosi's party leadership post. Now, I don't have a guess about that. Continuing with the article, their rise was set up when the current top three House Democratic leaders announced Thursday that they would step aside, with the current number three leader, Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, even endorsing the new leadership trio. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer endorsed Jeffries in a letter to Democrats announcing his own decision to step back and issue statements Friday backing Clark and Aguilar. And Pelosi, in a Friday statement, gave her blessing to the incoming leaders. A new day is dawning, and I am confident that these new leaders will capably lead our caucus and the Congress. These leaders are the same old leaders, just younger. Servants to the corporations, servants to the wealthy, servants to the rich, people not in touch with the base of the Democratic Party. A new day is not dawning just because the old leaders step back and these new leaders, who are clones of the old leaders, take over. We need someone who is in the corner of new policies and who will fight for those new policies. And that is not any of this trio of new leaders, but rather that would be Debbie Dingell, Majona Goose, Jamie Raskin, one of the squad members. That's the kind of leadership team we need. Not this group. Not this group that has been sitting at the knees of Nancy Pelosi for so long. Jeffries, Clark, and Aguilar made their bids official Friday morning, though other candidates might still emerge. But the movements, as lawmakers depart for the Thanksgiving recess, cap drawn out machinations within the House Democratic caucus as members plan for a potential future without their current long-standing leaders. Seems to me they're planning for a potential future of the kind their long-standing leaders would like to see. Not the kind, a future that the American people need. What they need from the Democratic Party is something different. They need a party that will fight for them. Hours after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's announcement, Jeffries was continuing to huddle with fellow Democrats in the Capitol as he worked to secure votes across the caucus. Pelosi was expected to step down from leadership after the midterm elections, but the attack on her husband, Paul Pelosi, and Democrats' better than expected showing complicated her decision. Meanwhile, other ambitious lawmakers had quietly maneuvered to lock up support for caucus-wide bids. The stress-free succession that ultimately materialized has senior Democrats breathing a sigh of relief. Here's some bullshit, folks. Quote, "We want to come across as mature leaders of the nations, so we don't need any fighting and screaming and name calling. I think the best way to start off the new Congress is to have a Democratic caucus that is not engaged in pettiness and hostility towards each other," said Representative Manny Cleaver, Democrat from St. Louis, Missouri. Manny Cleaver, who used to be pretty militant, is old and tired. He doesn't want to fight. He doesn't care that this group that's trying to take over is not a progressive group and wants to keep on going along the same track. The Democratic Party has just gotten through an election. It's 2 years until the next one. I think they have time for an internal fight to get more progressives into the leadership. And I think they should have such a fight. I'm wanting to see it. I support such a fight. I support bringing in people who will work for the people and not for the corporations and not for the donors, and not for the party consultants, and not for the people who have led us to this very defeat. House Democrats' leadership elections are still scheduled to begin on November 30th, when they're set to select their new slate of leaders and consider any potential changes to their rules, such as term limits for committee chairs or making the campaign chief's job appointed instead of elected. The most competitive leadership battle in the caucus could be for its vice chair, which currently has four declared candidates. Well, it seems to me that Aguilar is currently one of those candidates. So, since he's running for caucus chair, why doesn't he just step aside? Anyway, those are my views. I'm not quite done. Potential contenders for leadership like Jayapal had quietly maneuvered for months in subtle efforts to build alliances before dropping bids for the top spot. She built the influence of her liberal voting bloc this Congress, raised money for electorally vulnerable candidates, and toured swing districts around the country. But the Progressive Caucus ill-timed letter urging President Joe Biden to engage in direct diplomacy with Russia over its war in Ukraine caused a backlash among Democrats and forced the group to retract it. That move had raised eyebrows among many Democrats and likely hurt Jayapal's leadership aspirations. Jayapal had instead sought out fellow members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus to gauge support for a re-election bid in recent days, according to two sources familiar with the situation. It's not that there hasn't been a competition. I would think that they've reached some sort of solution, observed Judy Chu of the caucus leadership dynamics. She called it a good thing for the intra-caucus rivalries to be sorted out ahead of time. Some Democrats who have eyed the tumult in House Republicans' leadership elections, potential threats to Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's speakership bid with a certain degree of schadenfreude, have been glad to look like a steady hand in comparison, even as their leadership undergoes massive upheaval. Quote, with the current leadership moving to the side, actually having some certainty and clarity about the next team is, I think, something reassuring for the caucus, said Jerry Connolly, Democratic of Virginia, who's in the next congressional district over from myself. And Representative Benny Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi, said he was glad it's not a dogfight. I'm glad that we leave with an understanding and it's time to pass the torch and people move on. It is time to pass the torch, but it's time to pass the torch to leaders with new views and different views, and not to a new set of corporate leaders and donors who will be representing the rich and who will not represent the interests of the people. So that is my pitch for tonight. I'll be happy to take a look at your comments. Right now, Steve Wolfbrand says, investigate Hunter and Biden. Steve says, does it really matter who leads a minority party in the House? Steve, okay, it really does, because the minority party leader in the House is very likely to become the majority party leader and the Speaker of the House at some future time. Just ask Kevin McCarthy. That's what has happened. But it's also particularly matters in a situation such as the present, where the margin in the House is so slim. There will be challenges to Kevin McCarthy from his right side, and he will want to make deals with Democrats. Steve Wolfbrand says, salute, Bonnie. No, Ezra decided that he didn't have much to say about the leadership battles. He said that I follow those more closely than he, and so he thought that he would simply step out for tonight. But on the question of who leads a minority party in the House, if this kind of Congress, if Kevin McCarthy loses support on certain issues, he may find himself actually negotiating with the Democrats for support. For example, if they run a vacate the chair motion on Kevin McCarthy in order to get a worse swinger in there, Kevin McCarthy may look across the aisle for support. And then the minority leader will be in a very good position to extract concessions. And how good the minority leader is at extracting concessions will then be important. If we want to extract concessions from Kevin McCarthy, we want a progressive in there extracting those concessions. We want somebody like Katie Porter in there to extract concessions, and not someone like Hakeem Jeffries, who has the same interests at heart as Kevin McCarthy has. Kay says, I think Clyburn needs to go. Me too. I think Clyburn needs to go too. Kay says, Clyburn screwed Nina. I know he did. And Kay says, makes me mad, Steve. Oh, she says that. Made me so mad, Steve. Steve Wolfbrand says, ugh. Nothing will fundamentally change, Kay says, exactly. What happened to dumping the incumbents? Oh, we are still in process of building this campaign, but we don't call it dump the incumbents. We call it dump the corruption. Why? Because both parties are taking the big money. Candidates of both parties are taking the big money. So we don't want to just dump the incumbents. We want to dump the candidates of both parties taking the big money. That's why we changed the name to hashtag dump the corruption. Also, empowering democracy is now the general umbrella. And the meme is empowering democracy by dumping the corruption, which means we dump all the candidates who are taking the big money. Kay says, yes, Steve. Kay says, looks like Musk is bringing Twitter down. Glad I never went on there. Kay says, I like Dingle. So do I. By the way, she's Dingell rather than Dingle. Ghostart says, good vibes. Kay says, hi, Steve. And Steve Go Start says, hi, K. Ryan. Okay, folks, I think that's it for tonight. Oh, there's a comment from Steve Go Start who says, you can't make this up. New York Times planning a live event with Sam Bankman-Fried, Zelensky, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, and U.S. Treasury Janet Yellen as the main speakers. Cost to attend $2,400. I know I can't make that up. It is such a bad look for Janet Yellen to be on there with those people. It's such a bad look. She is so out of touch. Totally out of touch. The New York Times is out of touch too. Crazy. Cancel the frickin' event. God, these people are such nincompoops. Anyway, I'm done for tonight. I'm done for the weekend, I think. Though it's possible there'll be some panel show sometime on the weekend that I might be a panelist on. But I won't be doing any shows of my own for sure.
Did Pelosi mention Dingle?
Did Nancy Pelosi mention Dingle? No. Dingle right now is not running for one of the senior leadership spots. She's just running for the vice chair spot, the vice chair of the caucus. I think that's bad for her. I don't think she has that much more time. I think she needs to go for leadership now. I think she should immediately jump in against Hakeem Jeffries. We need a choice in that election. Thank you, Steve Gostart, for that juicy piece of information. And good night, all. I'll see you on Monday.